Welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast. As you know, the Faith and Fandom podcast is now part of the Love Thy Nerd network, and you can catch new interviews there first over at lovethynerd.com/faith and fandom before you see it anywhere else. And today I am joined by Andy Field, who is a actor, voice actor, instructor, coach, Airbnb remodeler, and a million other things. Andy, welcome, man.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you, dude. It's been a good 4 years or probably since I've seen you. I feel like.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I feel like the Avengers movies hadn't dropped, but were dropping the last time I saw you.
Really? Wow. So it must have been Fayetteville Comic Con.
Yeah, I think it was right before Fayetteville, and I think we had gotten some noodles and
yeah. Well, I remember I was just looking at the shirt I got from you yesterday, and I was thinking I might wear it, but I didn't wear it. But with the Darth Vader that says, "Oh
yeah, I find your lack of faith disturbing."
Yep.
It's been probably one of the most popular things I've ever made.
I love that one. It's awesome. I've worn it to several conventions as well. So, when I preach the Nerd Church service, I'll wear that. It's a good Sunday shirt.
Yeah. So, Andy, I'd say your primary thing that you are known for, as indicated right behind you, your voice work. How did you get into voice work?
Well, I was a teacher, which means I was broke, and I had 3 side hustles. So I was working 4 jobs if you count teaching. And one day I was in the kitchen and I was imitating our football stadium announcer. We lived in Oxford, Mississippi, so Ole Miss. And I was like, "That's another first down." And my wife was like, "Oh my gosh, you should be an announcer guy." And I was like, "Well, these 3 side hustles aren't quite enough. Let me see. I'm going to go Google that." Because it always kind of been, I didn't really know about voice acting, and I certainly didn't think I was going to move to LA and be, in Rugrats or something like that. But, and
that's
so I went,
Rugrats,
some Nickelodeon cartoon or something like that. So I went and I Googled it, and I was like, okay, with the internet, this was 2013 at the time, so about 10 years ago. With the internet, you could do this from home. And I was just thinking, I'd like to make enough money to, pay my electric bill. I wasn't looking to make it a career. And within, like that first year, I made significant money, I guess. I was really busting my behind to make it. But, and then after 3 years, I quit teaching. All those side hustles were gone. The Army Reserve was one of those side hustles, and it stayed for a few more years until I retired from there. But which is how I ended up meeting you. I was able to get to North Carolina with the Army Reserve. So that's how I did it. I just Googled how do you become a voice announcer guy, and just started doing it, man. And it was a rough road learning how to do that stuff with zero acting training, zero idea of how the industry was. But I was just consumed with laser focus, man. And I just was reading everything that I could find on Facebook in particular. I think is the most informative social media platform for voiceover, for voice acting in general. That's how I got started.
When you got started, what was the first, your first role you got,
nice.
For a job?
So this was November of 23, and I got to lead into this with this. And I was going till about 1 a.m. every night recording everything I could find on this one website. And it took me several weeks to realize that the microphone I was using was not even picking me up, that I was just recording straight into the built-in microphone, down there by the keyboard. Yeah. I didn't know. My headphones were so bad, I didn't even know. I just didn't even know how good or bad it was supposed to sound. I probably did 300 auditions like that. And then finally, and I was looking everywhere. Craigslist, who knows? So I got a gig on Craigslist from a producer. And that word, a producer. Oh, turns out anybody who's making anything is called a producer. So, if I turned around and made an Instagram video, I'm the producer of that video. Anyway, I got a free gig. And I was just like an announcer on the radio in the background of some short film she was making. And then I picked up another free gig in some Star Trek fan fiction, and it's so bad. Even then, I knew this is so bad that I'm embarrassed to tell anybody I'm in it. And then, so the first paid gig was on that website, which was voices.com, which I don't necessarily recommend. I got a gig as zombie voices in the video game Contagion. And I was excited. It paid $100. I was so excited, but I still didn't know if I could act. I mean, because I was just doing zombie noises. So I still didn't know if anybody thought anything I did with my voice was any good. And so in the second month, I got a 17-minute long narration on how to fill out IRS Form I-9. And they paid $175. So it's about $10 a minute. And I'm going to tell you, I was like, if I could just do this once a month, I'd be happy with this gig. I just need to pay the electric bill or whatever. But also somewhere in there, I picked up a $75 gig on Craigslist recording affirmations for someone to listen to in his morning routine. People who need to hear, people who believe that magically hearing positive things makes them. And so for $75, I recorded, and I'm not lying to you, these were some of the lines. You are a very handsome man. In the gym, no one can lift more weight than you. At parties, ladies think you are hilarious. I'm the freaking man. These were the lines that this guy, and I could just picture him in the gym, listen, I'm the freaking man. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever watch Nacho Libre?
I still have not, and it's like one of those that I really want to see because I love Jack Black, and the premise of that movie is hilarious.
So the premise is hilarious, but there's one point where there's the big bad guy wrestler is getting oiled up by an old elderly man. He's like, Ramses, he's the best. Ramses' muscles are the strongest. And that's when you're saying that. That's funny. But also just complete rabbit trail. We'll jump right back in. But I found out within the last year that Nacho Libre is a real person.
No way.
And that I can't remember his real name, but his wrestling name was Fray Tormenta. And he was a Mexican priest that kept an orphanage open for 25 years by wrestling.
Nice.
And so now he officiates weddings and stuff in the luchador mask. And that's how wow. I found him. I'm like, so the dude literally kept an orphanage open by wrestling, but now that's his gig.
That's awesome. And I've got an affinity for Lucha Libre. It's so I lived in El Paso for 2 years after I ran into you, and I did El Paso Comic Con. In addition to, I just immersed myself in Mexican culture because El Paso is American, but 80% of El Pasoans speak Spanish, and a large percentage of them don't speak English. And it's literally the only major American city right on the border with another major Mexican city. Right. So there's 2 million people right there in the largest binational community in the hemisphere. And so the Lucha Libre there is insane, and it's hilarious. And at El Paso Comic Con, they had Lucha Libre. They had wrestlers, and they busted through the door and broke out into a fight on the convention floor. It was fantastic. I mean, they were throwing each other into tables, and the crowd was just following them everywhere with their phones. And I was like, so yeah, I bought a luchador mask. I think mine is a luchador named Fishman.
Okay.
I think I had to look it up. I mean, I thought they were all just unique masks, but no, there were like 20 masks for sale, and they were all of famous luchadors. But man, I find that Mexico is about 30 years behind the United States in that a lot of them still think wrestling is real, and they are big into the unfolding soap opera of which luchador is mad at who, just like we all were 30 years ago when we really were convinced that Junkyard Dog and Ted DiBiase were really real, people, and that fight was really real. And, somebody went to the hospital from one of those fights, it was such great sports.
Now people still watch it. They just watch the same wrestlers give TikToks about how, here's how we're advancing the storyline.
Everybody appreciates the pageantry of it all and the showmanship of it all and the athleticism of it all. It's awesome.
My household has really gotten more into wrestling because my 10-year-old, I took her to a wrestling match almost by accident. But when you're in Fayetteville, there's a comic shop there called Dragon's Lair. Mm-hmm. And the owner is started a rock band called Fear State. And I set in, he's my comics provider, and he's a nice guy, and he always supports me. I was like, all right, I'm going to come see your band whenever I can, like at some point, because schedules are bananas. And went to go the one time that he was local, like within a mile of my house, was his band was playing for a small wrestling promotion, and like as the opener for the show. And so I asked my 10-year-old, it's like, look, I'm gonna go see this dude play some rock music. Do you want to come? She's like, where's it at? I'm like, a wrestling thing? And she's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And worst mistake ever. Because now my 10-year-old's like all about it, wants to watch pay-per-views, wants to go to the live events. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. There's worse things. But it's like I haven't paid attention to wrestling since like 2000, and now it's like, okay, this is back. But it's been an interesting thing. So what was the first thing that you like that you landed, you felt like, okay, I've accomplished, I'm kind of in this, like this isn't just a side hustle, this feels like an achievement?
Some things came along. So like the first year I was doing voiceover, I landed a pretty well-paying regional commercial. It like played in 3 states that weren't even anywhere near me, but the money of it was a number that I didn't know was possible. You know, as a teacher, I wasn't making but maybe, $40-something thousand a year, and this commercial paid like $7,000. So it was and it was like. And it was like for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and like nobody heard it except like over in Utah and Colorado. But I realize now, looking back on it, part of the reason it paid so well was like there were 4 pages of phone numbers, because wherever they played that commercial was a different phone number, and they paid pretty well for each of those, what they call in the business, they call those tags. So each tag probably paid like $75. So it all just added up to several $1,000s, and I was like, wow. Man, I've made it now. I'm going to book these $7,000 gigs all the time from now on. I did not. Narrator. He did not, in fact, book $7,000 gigs. But like the next year, I got like a national commercial for Virgin Mobile, and it paid a couple $1,000s. And I was like, you know what? And for a while, I felt like I was getting like a national commercial every year. And it was paying a few $1,000s because I wasn't in the union. Now I know that, oh my goodness, national commercials pay so much better than that if you finally get one. But, so that was 13, 14, 15. And then in 16, I got Five Nights at Freddy's. And that was kind of the first thing I got where people were going to recognize me. And even before the game came out, people were like speculating who I was because they could see my name on the website where I'd been cast. And they were like doing YouTube videos about me already. And I was like, what? And then the game came out, and it just exploded. And now I've been in five Nights at Freddy's games. And if you're a fan listening, you're probably forgetting about the AR game that everybody has forgotten about. That was a pretty big one at one point. But yeah, I think the commercial work certainly says I can do this, but the Five Nights at Freddy's work kind of said, you're a pro. You can do this. And now I'm 10 years into this thing and making a very good full-time living at it. And, but yeah, I think it was the commercial work that really finally cemented in me that I was going to be a pro at this.
And you've got a image, and I'll see if they'll throw this in here too, is, you've got an image of all of your voice acting characters together.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it's quite the collage. I just had this made. All these other voice actors, especially the anime ones, they get these collages made for the Comic Cons. And I was like, I have done a lot. And so I saved a few of the pictures, and then I had to go back and look at a few more. And some of those are games that have never seen the light of day, but I got paid to voice the character in them. And some of them are small, and some of them are, not well known. There is a Bumblebee in there that's actually in a commercial. A public service announcement over in North Carolina, I think. Okay. What was the name of that county? Mecklenburg County, isn't that North Carolina? Mm-hmm. It was like for a literacy program, and they had a Bumblebee, and they submitted it for the Emmy, but it didn't get the nomination. So one of them is a cartoon character from the Tuttle Twins cartoon. I don't know if you're familiar with Tuttle Twins, but they're kind of a conservative, right-leaning, libertarian cartoon series. It's based off the books. Based off the books, the Tuttle Twins. I play Babe Ruth's manager, where the twins travel back in time and meet Babe Ruth's manager, where he explains to them why Babe gets paid more than the other players, which is it's not equal, but it's fair. And so it's it's a very libertarian concept that not socialist whatsoever. But and some of those are pretty big games. You get the Five Nights at Freddy's in there, and Paladins, and Contra Returns was a cool one that I voiced all that, and then realized it was kind of big when it came back to the United States, and that was cool because I played Contra up a storm in the 1980s, 90s, whenever it came out. But a lot of those characters are just, sometimes you get paid and you voice it and you don't even know what it's in, and it's interesting. But yeah, it's quite the collage. A couple, probably 100 more characters in there.
That's awesome. And so through the process, how did you, because you've done some like in-person live action acting as well, how did that transition happen?
Well, everything I've done, so when I first got into voice acting, I was reading everything, doing everything, and I was signing up for everything, and and somehow I signed up for some background actor casting. I mean, I was just looking for anybody with the word casting in their name. And so we were living in Oxford, Mississippi, which is in the north part up near Memphis, Tennessee. And I got a phone call. And I mean, I didn't even understand the person on the phone other than, hey, this is blah, blah, blah from blah, blah, blah casting and blah, blah, blah. And can you be in New Orleans tomorrow? We'd like you to play a special agent in NCIS New Orleans. And I was like, whoo, I've made it. I have made it. This is it. Right. And so, and I don't know that I really even understood, but being an extra in a movie sounded like fun, or in a TV show. So, I said to my wife, baby, pack up, we're going to New Orleans. Well, extras get paid in non-union states like Louisiana, get paid like, I don't know, $100 a day. I mean, you can't go to New Orleans for $100 a day. You can't stay in the La Quinta for $100 a day. And so we stayed in the La Quinta one night, and then a casino had a deal, and they gave me 2 free nights in the hotel. Of course, they're expecting you to go in there and lose money in the casino is why they're so willing to let you stay in their rooms for free. And so we went to New Orleans for 3 days, and I sat out there in the summer heat, and I was a special agent in the background on NCIS New Orleans. And I got like almost no screen time, like no one would ever know that I was in it. And so I said, well, this was fun, and the food was great, but I don't have time in my life to come be an extra basically for free, or to lose money to be an extra. This is not a career enhancer. This is not anything that's going to, make it. There were lots of guys there who were just like extras for a living. Like they just were extras 10, 15, 20 days a month. And I was like, I even said to one guy, I said, have you ever thought about like real acting, like speaking roles? He's like, I have, man, but it's so hard. You really got to. I'm like, well, yeah, it's hard, but they get paid so much better for it. You got to worry about your hands and your face and all that stuff. And I'm like, yeah. So I said I wasn't going to be an extra anymore. And then one day, my wife and I became fans of The Walking Dead. And I was taking an acting class from a guy, and he was like, now, are you interested in on-camera acting? I said, not really, but I just know that this class will help me be a better voice actor. I said, with the exception that I would pay them $200 if I could be a zombie on The Walking Dead. And he said, well, they pay like $100 a day, but if you got a speaking role in Walking Dead, even a minor one, it'd be like $5,000. And I was like, well, let's talk about how to do that then. And so I never really did pursue that more, but I was at a Comic-Con later for my Five Nights at Freddy's work, and there was an extra from The Walking Dead at the Comic-Con. And people were buying his autograph for $20. And he would get new prints every Comic-Con, and they would come buy new prints. And he said, dude, if you want to be an extra on The Walking Dead, just sign up for this casting agency. And so I just went to that casting agency on Facebook. And he said, if they're looking for skinny people, that's walkers. If they're looking for tough people, that's usually bad guys. And if they're looking for survivors, that's usually, villagers, like the residents of Alexandria, that kind of stuff on The Walking Dead. And so sure enough, man, within a couple of weeks, they were looking for tough-looking survivors. And I'm like, I'm bald with a beard. Let me slap on some of my Army gear and go out in the yard and take a picture. And I did, and they said, we want you. So I went and I was on Walking Dead. I don't know, season 8, episode 8 or something like that. And I was there for 3 days, and it was fun to be part of a franchise that I really, really loved. But, you know, wasn't worth the money. I think I slept in my truck the first night, and then a dude and I split an Airbnb the second night. But while I was there, I felt like I wasn't going to get a good face shot. I felt like I wasn't going to make it on camera. And I said, well, I'll come back and do this again. Well, while I was there, the guy that I was splitting the B&B with said, dude, are you in the military? Because they're casting real soldiers for the next Marvel film, for the Avengers film. And I was like, Marvel is in Atlanta with Walking? He's like, yeah. I was like, no way. So I signed up for that, and I sent in my military headshot, you know, the one that they hang on the wall when you're in command. And they cast me right away for what I thought was Avengers 3. And so I came out to Atlanta again, and I can't even remember where I stayed, but it was cheap. I was Airbnb-ing it, and I was staying, and we did 3 days in the summer heat, and you know, and I got to see little bits and pieces of things. And I was in the scene with Robert Downey Jr., and so then I was like, oh, I've got spoilers, and they told us all, don't share this with anybody. Don't ruin the magic of these Marvel movies with anybody. But there were some spoilers that I shared from time to time. And then as the movie was about to come out like a week later, I shared some pretty solid spoilers. And then I went and saw the movie on opening day with a theater full of Avengers fans. And that's the way to see it, man. That's like going to the movies in the 1950s when everybody cheers for the hero. I mean, when Thor shows up in that battle, when the Avengers are about to lose and Thor shows up, there was literal applause in the theater, people hooping and hollering. And I mean, you don't get that, you know, on day 8.
No, and when in Endgame when he picks up the hammer, or when Captain America picks up the hammer, a thunderous applause. But yeah,
exactly. Which funny you should mention Endgame. So as the movie progressed, Infinity War, I kept saying to myself, there is not enough time left in this movie for my scene to fit here. And sure enough, the movie just ends and goes to credits, and Thanos has won. And the theater's just sitting there in stunned silence, but my stunned silence is double because I'm like, I wasn't in that movie. And I thought I was. There's going to be a fourth. I mean, nobody knew there was going to be a fourth Avengers film in Endgame. And so I had just let several spoilers slip, and then we had a whole year to go again for Endgame. And the spoiler that I let slip was that Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man, somehow goes back in time and meets his dad.
I was one of those people you had told.
Yeah, I remember that. There were a couple more. He somehow goes back in time and meets his dad. Not sure why, but at the time, I thought his dad knew who he was. I didn't realize that he was just there, and his dad just thought he was some weird guy with a weird beard. And I didn't see Chris Evans, but I saw Chris Evans' stand-in, which was kind of funny because they had like a military advisor there telling all of us who were playing soldiers a little bit. And one thing he told us was, don't walk around with your chest all pumped out and your arms swinging like that, you know, just because you have on an army uniform. Just walk like a regular dude. And then I saw this one dude walking like that. And I was like, oh, it was Chris Evans' stand-in. So he hadn't gotten the brief from the guy who was wrangling all the extras. So I was in Endgame. And then while I was at Endgame, just to make this story a little bit longer, so while I was there filming for Marvel, I got the call to be in another episode of Walking Dead. So I did 3 solid days on, and then at the end of that day, like at 5 o'clock, I went straight over and did 3 solid nights on Walking Dead. It was the scene where the Saviors attack the hilltop.
Yeah.
In season 8. You know, it's all nighttime, and man, I just knew after those 3 nights that I had some hero shots on camera. There was like, I was leading a wedge-shaped formation of saviors, and I had a bow and arrow, and everybody had their savior weapons, and man, we were sneaking through the woods, and the camera was right in front of me, man. It was just, I was like, this is gonna be amazing. I literally, and I'm not exaggerating, I got 0.4 seconds of screen time in that episode. And in the episode before, where I thought I didn't get anything, I got like 4 solid seconds where you're like, that's Andy! That's for sure, Andy.
I think the one where you pull up on the truck, right?
Well, yeah, we were in the truck on. Yeah, so there's. I had to make an animated GIF of my part just so you could see me, and it's me just doing this with a bow. That's all you got was that. That's it. But in the first episode I was in, it's where it's where the saviors massacre the heapsters, the trash people that live in the dump.
Yeah.
And so we would there's a good eye-popping shot of me just walking up and snatching a gun from a guy and mean mugging him and then walking off. And I was like, yeah, there you go. That's my 4 seconds of fame right there. The other 3 nights just wore me out, man. I worked like 24 straight hours and then slept and then worked another night and then slept. And then the last night that I worked, when the sun came up and they wrapped us and sent us all home, I just drove 6 hours home, and it was just, it was hard, but it's really cool to be part of a couple of franchises that I'm a big fan of. I would do it again, for Star Wars.
Right.
If but who wouldn't? Every celebrity in Hollywood wants to be in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert in the Lord of the Rings. Once you geek out on that stuff, that's the limit of my on-camera stuff, really. I've done some on-camera narrations for educational films and things like that. Every now and then one of my buddies will say, dude, is this you? And it's a video of me for this company called The Lost Ways, and I'm out in the woods with a rifle, and I'm like, this is how you make pemmican, or this is how you make hardtack. And then I did audition on camera for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie that's coming out in October.
Okay.
Because it's here. I live in Louisiana now, and it's in Louisiana. And of course, they cast the A-listers. They cast them from Hollywood. But all the extras and minor speaking roles, they try to cast locally. For one, that's just part of their agreement with filming in New Orleans. But I've got a Baton Rouge agent, and I've told her, man, I really only do voiceover. But I said to her, hey, I need auditions for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And then I also just emailed the casting director direct and said, I'm a voice actor in the video game. And so they sent me the auditions, and it was a special audition just for me. And I thought, well, if anything's going to give me the role, it's not my acting prowess. It's going to be the gimmick that I'm one of the voice actors. This is going to be one of those little Easter eggs for the fans if I get a role. I didn't get the role, but there's 2 things that encourage me. The guy who did get one of the roles is just a YouTuber. So they were really aiming for the Easter egg thing of it. He's just a Five Nights at Freddy's YouTuber. And then the other thing that maybe gives me hope is that Matthew Lillard, who's probably more popular as Shaggy in the live-action Scooby-Doo films, he signed a 3-movie deal. So if movie number 1 goes well, maybe I could be in movie number 2 or movie number 3, maybe. So, okay. But if movie number 1 bombs, which video game movies tend to,
I feel like Five Nights at Freddy's is a good enough property. Plus, you've the guy, the younger man that's playing the roles, like isn't that the dude from
Josh
Hunger Games?
Hutcherson? Yeah.
So
I liked him in RV. Did you see RV?
Yeah.
What a great film. What a great film. Yeah, but he was also in a film called Little Manhattan that my girls just loved. It's kind of a little tween romance. It's cute and sweet and funny. But yeah, he's a good actor, and yeah, he's a big name. And there's somebody.
I was wondering if you had any process in trying to be part of that franchise.
Man, I was putting forth the hustle to do it. And I've got on-camera actor friends who are like, well, that's the way to do it. If you emailed the casting director directly, that is, anybody listening, don't always email the casting director directly. That's not the way. But if you have something unique to offer, if they're, if they're looking for an Iraq War veteran and you're an Iraq War veteran, that's probably worth emailing the casting director directly over. If they're looking for an amputee, and you're an amputee and you've got something, you're something special, then that's worth. But, if they're just casting a 40-year-old white male, to play the mailman, you say, hey, I've always wanted to be an actor. Yeah, that's not the way to get. They're like, yeah, so has everyone else who is actually auditioning for this through their agents. So, do it the right way. But yeah.
I did an episode of Swamp Thing.
Did you?
Because my middle kid, at that time, she really loved Swamp Thing, and I saw that DC was doing live action show, and it's in Wilmington, which is an hour from here.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I put in for it, and they're like, sure, like come, I could go be an extra. And it was a big party scene. They needed a lot of people, and it was one of those things where it was that same thing of like the camera was directly at me, and I'm like, oh man, this could be so dope. I'm gonna be like right on camera, and like I am, but I'm the blurred out part where they focus on the gun.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's my vest. That's my thing. And it's that same thing of like, if I slow my stuff down enough, I can see me, or I can point out there's my hat.
Yeah.
But I think my biggest recognition in it was getting called out by the director for overacting. And I'm like, oh, because it was supposed to be a scene where like, um, a police officer is hallucinating that her son is killed. And so she pulls a gun on the party. And we're supposed to react to the gun being pulled in this crowd setting. And like, so when the gun gets pulled, like I instantly like parent mode, like try and like brace the people behind me or block the people behind me. Like some of you are acting a little more bravely than you actually would be.
That's so funny.
And he like dead eyed me, and I'm like, sorry. I was like,
funny.
It's like that's the whatever.
Yeah, and I was the same with Endgame. I was blurred out, and so I have a screenshot of Endgame with Robert Downey Jr. Like Robert Downey Jr.'s face is like this big, and then in the background is just a little blur, and I put a big gray arrow pointing at me, and that's my screenshot. I should print that out and sign that at Comic Cons. But
somebody would buy it.
You know, my dad was also an extra. He was in Steel Magnolias, which is filmed here in my hometown where I live in Louisiana.
That's awesome.
And so basically, we're like the Baldwins. We're a dynasty. You know, it's
extra dynasty.
Long tradition of background acting in my family.
I had one con actually book me because I was in Swamp Thing, and it was the worst con experience I ever had. And I was like, oh, this was a horrible life choice. Like they even made funny. Their social media poster like actor from Swamp Thing, and like had that. I was like, oh no, this is not where it wants to be. So what would you say, like career wise, and what you've been doing has been what you're proudest of? Like you feel like I'm glad this is part of my legacy.
Well, so this is the Christian angle of this whole thing. So I used to be, real involved in stuff, and even thought I was going to be a full-time minister at one point. I was active with Campus Crusade. I used to do street evangelism. I've evangelized on the streets of New Orleans, not the angry shouting evangelists, but the ones that have meaningful conversations on the street. But and so I realized, I've gotten this modicum of fame. Most people don't know who I am, but there's a lot of angsty teens out there that love Five Nights at Freddy's. That's a Five Nights at Freddy's reference, by the way, angsty teen. But and I've got an opportunity to share the Lord with people through this. And so I said, maybe I should just preach a church service on Sunday mornings at conventions. I'm there. Some people miss the convention on Sunday to go to church, and some people go to the convention and regret that they're missing church. So this is a need that could be filled. And then, the devil got the better of me, and he's like, no, man, not in this industry, not in this dark world. If you're going to get laughed out of here and never get another convention appearance again if you ask somebody about that. And at the time I needed the money from the convention appearances. I don't now, but they're just kind of fun, and it's nice to have. But and so I didn't do it. I didn't ask about it. Well, then I was at church, and this is when we were living in Mississippi, and you're in the South. In the South, football is religion number 2. You got God and you got football, and the college football in particular. And the pastor was talking about college football. It was about this time of year. He's like, football season is here, man, and you guys are going to start hanging flags on your cars and putting big magnets that say, we're on our way to see the Bulldogs play and all this stuff. And he says, and you're going to wear jerseys so everybody knows what team you're for. And he said, why don't you put on your Jesus jersey? Why didn't everybody know that's the team you're for? And I was like, yep, I'm going to send some emails to Comic Cons today. We're doing, I just was so convicted that I was just denying Christ in this whole thing, And so I emailed every convention that I had an appearance upcoming for. It was like 8 of them. And like 3 said yes. Yeah, we'll take a nerd church service. And so I've probably preached nerd church at over a dozen conventions now, where I just got to have church on Sunday. Sometimes 4 people come. Sometimes 90 people come. I mean, it just depends on the Los Angeles Comic Con. They let me do a church service. Godless Los Angeles, the place where you would have thought 100% was going to say no. And like 90 people came. It was amazing. And then, it's interesting culturally where it's big and where it's not. I've done Anime Weekend Atlanta several times, Branson, Missouri several times. I don't think Fayetteville didn't let me do it. I think they would if I came back a second time.
Yeah, Fayetteville's been weird. It's also changed owners. And
Really?
I did it once. I did a church service there once, and it's kind of been off and on difficult in the process. I'm gonna take one quick pause.
Okay.
Because my charger is not charging and I don't want this to cut out. 1 second.
Oh, I thought we were going to do a sponsor message. Faith in the Fandom and Love Thy Nerd is brought to you by Lifeway. Now back to our program. You're going to come back and watch this later and that was pretty funny. I'm digging all the nerd memorabilia in here, all the Funko Pops and the...
Okay, that's better.
Oh.
I had one in and it just wasn't doing it.
I like your shirt. I just noticed.
It was, I did a con at my church this past... it was this month. And like one of the vendors like gave me like a swag bag of thank you stuff, and it was in there. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I love Nightmare Before Christmas. It's so cool.
We did it where all of the vendors and artists were free. Like they didn't have to pay any booth fees or whatever. Just wanted to bless them, and like turned out really well with that. But no, cool. With Fayetteville, like we did one geek church service there, and good response. But like it's just been a weird thing of getting it back, and people have been kind of vocal about it. Like we want it in some areas, not like a lot, but like we're going to see. I'm going to shoot for this one. There's one in October. Going to try again. I've had really continued good success with Galaxy Cons, in terms of they have always said yes to me with that, and to the point where after their first big one back after the pandemic, when they first had their show back, they announced the show after I'd already booked a summer camp I was speaking at, and I couldn't set my booth up because the show ran Thursday through Sunday and I was speaking until Saturday morning. And so I was like, I can't ask for a church service if I'm not even setting my booth up. And then the week of, people were emailing me and saying, are we doing church at GalaxyCon? And I explained, they're like, ask anyway.
Yeah.
And dude, I asked and they said yes within 30 minutes.
And I'm going to tell you what's the cool thing about that. Even if that's all you do for that weekend, you're the first thing in the top left on the schedule for Sunday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nerd church at like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. on Sunday, usually in the ballroom is what they usually give me, which is, I wish they wouldn't sometimes. I know it's where all the audio stuff is, but I'm like, man, when 20 people show up to the ballroom, it just looks like a tiny church service. But if you put 20 in one of the small session rooms, panel rooms, it looks fantastic. It looks like the place is packed. So, but you just never know. But I try to book praise bands. I try to usually get somebody to come, and they'll either play for free, or a lot of times I tithe out of my earnings from the Comic-Con and give that to the praise band.
Nice.
And, so if I make, let's say $1,000 at the con, and that'd be a small con, I'll give them $100, but that's a little too small for that. But yeah, I've got, that's always been cool. And sometimes I get a praise band who comes in and sets up. Man, I did a convention in Chicago, and this band came in with their parents, and they set up like they were going to play the Superdome. And like, I don't know, 20 people came, you know, and so they were just like blowing it out, twirling drumsticks and all this stuff. And it just, and, you know, there's like 2 people in the back row, but you just never know who you're impacting. You know, it's, I did a Santa Fe Comic Con, Albuquerque, and one girl showed up to church. But she was a girl I had met the year before at Santa Fe Comic Con, and she needed it, wanted it, was looking for a church. And the girl doing the praise music was the worship minister at a local church, you know. And then a family of 3 came in, so that was my one where 4 people showed up. But I mean, and we were just in a small room, but you just never know the impact that thing's going to have. And so I've just kind of learned to be humble about it, and, you know, don't worry about who's going to show up. You know, God's going to show up. That's who's going to show up, right? You know, do it for Him. And so it's amazing, and it's but I hadn't gotten to do it in years. I didn't do any cons after the pandemic until this year. I've done one, and there was no church service at that one. And so you know, I hadn't done one in 3 or 4 years now, and I'm kind of missing that. But I've gotten plugged in again. I'm now the college Sunday school teacher at my church. And so now I'm just like neck deep in college activities. College kids, man. So now we've added now a Monday night college worship service, and they're there at their church until like 10 p.m. 10 p.m.? What? Man, I'm going to start coming there in my pajamas.
I did college ministry for about 11 years, and we would start at 6:30, and like I would leave it as an open space that if you wanted to hang out, if you wanted to talk, if you wanted to do whatever. And there were a good amount of nights I wrapped up at 2.
Yeah.
And that was one of those like, okay, I've aged out of this. I can't keep doing this.
Yeah, we had open gym Monday night. We're Baptist, so we have a gym. And so and so yeah, at 10 p.m., like we were kind of scheduling to be done at 10 p.m. and at 10:15, they were still spiking the volleyball at each other at the gym and playing 9 square. They've got 9 square there, and they like that a lot too. And ping pong. And I mean, they were just, and I was just like, man, I got to go home. And, but we have a university here too, and they have a BCM, Baptist Collegiate Ministry. And yeah, they go till midnight frequently at the BCM, probably 3 nights a week. And I'm just like, and those 2 ministers at the BCM are old, like 60 something. That's all. I mean, one day I'm going to be 60 something and be like, I can't believe I said this was old, but
right.
But I mean, they're grandparents, and they're there at midnight with the college kids. But in fairness, they can also go to work at 11 a.m. the next day if they want to. So
yeah,
and they tend to. Anyway, I love the young people, and really I miss the young people from teaching. I was a middle school teacher, and so the Comic Cons had been a way for me to reconnect with young people and spend more time. They're energizing, man. They charge my batteries up. So now I'm getting that fixed with the college kids here in town. But I've always liked kids. I got 2 degrees in elementary education and taught forever, and I've always been involved in college ministry and things like that. So yeah, I dig it. Anyway, that's the legacy that I get to leave from voiceover is that.
Yeah, that's a great legacy to have. And just knowing you made an impact in those capacities and use the opportunities that you have. And I think that can be a good reminder, because there's a lot of times people will discount that stuff. They're like, yeah, I did this, but you know, it's what's eternal, what's actually lasting.
Yeah. And you know, you never know. Like sometimes I'm like, that was a flop. I don't think I did a good job on that. But like literally 2 weeks ago, I got an Instagram message from a girl, and she said, hey, I was in the praise band at the con in Birmingham, which must have been 6 years ago. And she said, I just want to know if you still had your slides. You know, like, do you have that book? Or, you know, it was like she was asking me for references from that. She remembered the message that I preached and like referenced it and like seemed like it was still fresh in her mind. And I felt like I did a good job at that one anyway. That was, I was doing an invitation at those. And I learned that I don't need to do an invitation anymore, because what happens really, especially at a Comic Con, is people come up and want to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, oh, it's open mic night. Let me get on up there and talk to him real quick. And but what I do, he said is if you're a Five Nights at Freddy's fan and you make it to Nerd Church, you get a free photo with me all day. And so, people are always like, can we do a photo? And I'm like, yeah, it's however many dollars outside at the table. But here at Nerd Church, it's free. That's for you coming. So maybe
Fair
word will
point.
get out. Oh, yeah.
So, what advice or steps do you have for people who want to get into voice acting? And I know that's a whole,
It is.
whole thing.
I used to teach a class called The Business of Voiceover, and it was 16 nights, 90 minutes a night. And we would talk about, but of course, a lot of that is once you've gotten started, the things to do to get bigger in it. The secret, I think, really to getting started is just get started. Start reading. Go to Google. Go to Facebook, even if you're under 30. Because Facebook is where all the voiceover groups are. And young people like to call it VA, voice acting, but it's VO, voiceover. And the video games are just part of that. And figure out, start reading and say, how do you get going in this stuff? Do I need an agent? If I do need an agent, what do I do then? Or do I need but bear in mind, it's going to cost time and money, and you can exchange time for money and money for time a little. The most successful students I've ever had already had well-paying day jobs, and so they were able to drop money on good gear right away and drop money on good training right away. But I didn't have good gear right away or good training right away. I just got started, and I exchanged time for money. I was up till 1 a.m. all the time auditioning and reading and studying and saying, okay, my next step is this. I need to get a demo made. I need to scrape up, this much money and get a demo made and blah, blah, blah. So resign yourself to the fact that it will cost much time and money, just like any vocation. You want to be a teacher, that's going to cost you 4 years of college. You want to be a welder, that's going to cost you apprenticing or, and all this, and also buying welding gear. So that, and then, what was I going to say? Get started. That's really it, is get started. There are people out there who'll say, you should not get started till you've had acting lessons. Your acting coach will know when it's time for you to get started. And I think that's a good way to discourage like everyone. I mean, if you told me that I had to take guitar lessons and after, 6, 7, 8 months, maybe we'd learn a song, but I had to first learn everything there was to know about guitar, I would just not ever play guitar. Same with voice acting. If you told me don't even buy a microphone for the first year, just start taking acting lessons, I would be like, what? Are you kidding me? But, don't get in a rut where you have found this little piece of the voiceover industry and you're just there and you can't figure out why you can't advance. And it's because you keep doing $5 jobs on castingcallclub.com or castingcall.club because you're in this tiny microcosm of a massive industry. And the other is to have the humility to do stuff that you don't necessarily think you want to do. Imagine a musician, a guitarist who says, I don't play weddings. I am going to sign with a major record label. I don't need your $200 for the wedding, thank you. Well, guess what? You're going to work at Starbucks, or a painter who says, $200 to paint your fraternity house on the side of an ice chest. My good sir, I paint landscapes. Well, you're going to paint landscapes while you work at Starbucks, right? It's the same deal with voiceover. You get all these people say, I want to be an anime. I am not going to do commercials. I am not going to record educational courses. Well, then you're going to be a barista. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a barista, but that's not what you want to be if you want to be an actor. You got to have the humility to say, yeah, I'll record a corporate narration for a company that makes tractors. No problem. That was $300. You want to do what you have to do to spend your day in the room where the microphone is, because then when the animation audition for Nickelodeon comes in, you can respond to it right away. And you don't have to be the number 200 person to respond to it tonight at 10 p.m. when you got off your shift at Sonic. It's have the humility to be involved in the entire industry, not just animation, which is a really small piece of the voiceover industry. Have the humility to do a local car commercial for Bob's GMC Buick, which, by the way, he'll pay you once or twice a month. to do those commercials. He could be a regular client. I know voice actors that only do local car commercials. They do 5 a day. And it's just they wake up every morning to 5 car commercials that pay $125 a piece. And then they figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their day. That's, that certainly frees you up to focus on anime and animation and, video games. So that's the humility, maybe, is a little bit of it. Don't be so proud of yourself that you only are going to do character work. Oh, one more thing. Be okay with your own voice. There's so many voice actors out there like, I really hate my own voice. And that's okay to have that mindset, but know that you need to get past that mindset, because the number one voice that any voice actor, if you go to any Comic-Con and meet any voice actor, Tara Strong, any of the big voice actors from any of the big video games and animations, and say, what's the most important voice that I should master? The answer is always your own. You've got to master your own. In fact, most cartoon voices are really just that actor's voice, maybe with a slight variation, maybe with an accent, maybe, with a slightly different, if I were going to play an old man, it would still be this voice. I just kind of relax the muscles in my mouth and I get a little breath here. I slow down. I imagine that I'm wearing a big backpack, maybe a 40, 50 pound backpack, and everything's just a little slower and the mouth is a little lazier. And then you say, in my day, the internet was called books, and that's how you play an old man. But it's still this voice, If I were going to play somebody's mother, it would still be this voice. You just get a little more, raise your eyebrows up a little bit more, and you say, well, honey, everybody eats peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at school sometimes. That's, this is your voice to play a mother. So it's really not, most of us can't do 800 voices.
Yeah.
If you notice, my voice in the Five Nights at Freddy's games is just this voice, but a little more infomercial. It seems you had some trouble with the keypad. That's me. But it's still this voice. That's what got the job, was this voice. Actually, back in the day, I still hadn't really mastered my Southern accent. And so I can hear it all over those games from 2016. So, yeah. That was a lot of advice for somebody wanting to get into the thing.
And you had mentioned too that you've got a conference coming up.
Oh, yeah. So there's a big voiceover conference. Well, there's several throughout the year, but the biggest voiceover conference where professionals in voiceover and aspiring professionals gather is VO Atlanta, and it's spelled just like VO Atlanta, and it meets in Atlanta, as one might imagine, in March. And this year, I am the director of the children's program, which is a satellite program of VO Atlanta. And we take kids from 8 to 17, and we break them up into 2 groups, and all throughout the day. And we've got coaches and casting directors and agents and other kids who are successful in voiceover, and parents of voiceover. And the kids just spend 2 whole days developing into voice actors. Parents can come to a little bit of it, but there's like the opening thing, and like there's a panel where agents and stuff talk. But the parents typically just hang out at the pool there at the Hilton while their kids go to the voiceover conference. But it's a conference and it's expensive, and so is travel to Atlanta, so it's not, a Comic-Con type event where you would go and spend $30 and get to meet celebrities, but it's a professional conference where if you're serious, if it's really a career field you're exploring, it's a good thing to go to. So look up VO Atlanta, the children's program, and I'm directing it, but I'll present one of the sessions at it, where kids will get up and read. And it's similar. A lot of times at Comic-Cons, voice actors will have a panel, and I've done this, where it's like how to audition for video games, and people in the audience come and they just like listen to it all. But some people are brave enough to get up to the mic, and they read, and then I'll say, okay, now do it like this, and they do it. But it's not really good training because it's a Comic-Con, and we've got to, but if you're in a 90-minute session with a professional casting director, and there's only 12 of you in there, everybody gets to read and get legitimate quality feedback. And you get to do that all day long. And so it's really good training. On the adult side of that conference, whenever I go, I feel like I've gotten a 6-month boost. I feel like I'm 6 months further ahead in my career than where I was before the weekend. And you come out energized, and you come out with a to-do list a mile long of things you want to do to make sure you're going to make this happen. And the children are allowed to go to the adult sessions. So if you look at the schedule and you're like, I don't really want to go to this improv session, we should go to the improv sessions. But and then over in the adult conference is they're having a panel with somebody who's talking about how to grow your social media following. Last year we had a guy speak at the conference who had 7 million followers on TikTok, Stefan Johnson. And Stefan talked about how to grow your social media following and how to leverage that in your business as a voice actor. That might be something that you want to skip at the children's conference and go over and do that. Or sometimes there's a speaker. Last year at the children's conference, we had the voice actress from SpongeBob. So that's something everybody always wants to go. Whenever there's somebody of note, somebody somewhat famous, then everybody wants to go to that. But it's a good conference. You should go to it if you're interested in being a voice actor. Seriously interested. It's part of that money I talked about having to spend.
Yeah, the time and the money.
Yeah.
Before we'd start recording, you and I were talking a little bit about AI. How do you what's your thoughts on AI and voice acting, and if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'm a little more pessimistic about it than the rest of my industry, I think. The consensus among voice talent is that AI is going to come in and take over the low-paying stuff, and it already is. I mean, I had a peer post something on Facebook the other day and said, yeah, I just got replaced by AI. So if you're on Fiverr doing $5, $10, $30 voiceovers, those companies are very likely to replace you with AI, because AI may be $30 for the year, as opposed to $30 every time they need a voiceover. The companies that are spending $400, $500, $600 per voiceover or more are less likely to go that way because they're willing to pay more for quality. They, like most voice actors, know that AI currently cannot replicate the human element. But, if you're doing $30 and you're just doing an e-learning course on how to prevent sexual harassment, and I've always told people, you should use a computer-based voice as long as you don't care about the results of the production you're making. And so, if you just need to have a video on how to prevent sexual harassment so that your employees are forced to watch it, and then you're covered. So anytime there's an incident at your company, you're safe. Your employees are held liable because they were forced to watch that terrible video with the terrible narration.
I just watched one last night, by the way.
Yeah, they're terrible. But if you want the human element in it, if you want someone who understands what they're reading and who kind of understands the nuance, understands the audience, understands storytelling, and who can respond to direction pretty quickly. Like if you came back to me and said, we'd like it to be just a little more cheerful. Maybe if you could put just a little more smile in this. This is kind of a dry topic, but we're still friendly. I can change that instantly. Whereas an AI operator, I think we're going to see the rise of operators who can say, make this a little more cheerful, and they know what to do to make AI sound that way. But, the common user like you and me is just picking a voice out off a website. We don't know how to manipulate that way. So I think we'll see the rise of people who can manipulate AI voices pretty well. But right now, today, AI is not able to replicate the human element. It's not able to sound sad if it's talking about his mother dying, or it's not able to sound. However, I am pessimistic enough to think that it will be there soon. They're trying to get it there now, so it's not like they're stopping trying. There's geeks working on this stuff 80 hours a week. Thousands of geeks working on this 80 hours a week to make this happen, and there's thousands of them out there trying to steal existing voices. And so we're real worried about that in the voiceover industry, and that's part of the strike right now with the Actors Union and probably the video game strike that's about to happen. We've authorized a video game strike. It hasn't begun yet. But a lot of that is the AI harvesting and implementing measures to protect us all from the AI horde that's advancing. But I think it's too little too late. I think it's already happening. I've heard my voice on the internet using racial slurs, and I've gotten it removed, and I've been able to do that. But yeah, I've even had people comment on TikTok, "Did you say this?" And I was like, "What are you even talking about?" And nobody would tell me what they were talking about. And finally, I found it, and I was like, "Yeah, this has got to go." But there was a website for a while that had Hand Unit's voice from Five Nights at Freddy's, and you could make it say whatever you wanted to make it say. And that's already out there. And it's going to happen for on-camera actors too. I mean, people were saying 10 years ago that, we could copy Harrison Ford now, and we can have Harrison Ford in a movie 80 years from now when Harrison Ford isn't around anymore, but God, the implications of that are just, I'm like, have you guys never read any science fiction at all? I mean, science fiction authors are brilliant. Like the good science fiction, Star Wars to me is not good science fiction. It's just an adventure film set in space. But good science fiction, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Star Wars.
I'm with you, but it is more just an adventure story.
It's just a Western. It's just a great movie set in space. But good science fiction, like Isaac Asimov novels and stuff, really look at where could technology take us and how will that change us? So like I read a great Isaac Asimov short story one time about clones. And in the future, clones were common. There were just clones walking around. And Star Wars explores that a little bit. I mean, is it really okay to clone a guy 800 times and just make all those people warfaring people for their whole life? Are those people? Are we allowed to do that with them? That's basically slavery. Or is it? Do they count?
I've heard that debate at my local GameStop.
Can they vote? But that's what Isaac Asimov is exploring. And in his world that he had created, clones were kind of treated as second-class citizens, kind of the way we treated African Americans in the late 1800s here in the United States, where they had separate water fountains and separate schools and separate places. And it was like, if somebody found out you were a clone, suddenly their attitude changed entirely about you. And it was just kind of a neat, but it's always a good exploration of where we're going and what's that going to be like. And so if we can completely replicate humans convincingly by voice and eventually by image, that's a lot. There's a lot of implications from that. How is that going to be used for evil? Yeah. When we can make the president, whoever the president is and is going to be, and 10, 15 years from now when Trump and Biden are long gone, we can make him say whatever we want convincingly. Is he even real? Is he even a real person? I've never seen him in person.
That was the plot of the 2003, 2002, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, the Batman graphic novel that was the sequel to Dark Knight Returns. Yeah, Lex Luthor had an AI president that he ran.
Good science fiction. That's just good stuff, man. And it's really, think of any technology. Where's that going to get? Time travel. What implications does time travel bring? Think of flying cars. What implications does that bring? Think if we had a rocket train going through part of the crust of the earth to get us from Chicago to China in 2 hours. What implications does that have? That flattens the world, man, when you've got China and the United States 2 hours apart. It's there's so much what comes from that. That's the fun science fiction to me. I really it's really fun to what if animals could what if we had technology where animals could talk? You could put something on them and they could talk, and we really could talk with them. What implications would come to that if we found out that dolphins were even smarter than we are? What would come from, anything? What if there are aliens? What implications come from that? And it's just really, really fun to think of.
Have you watched Black Mirror ever?
Just the first episode, and it was so disturbing. I never watched another one.
Okay, so
I've heard they're not quite as bad, but
I was told when it was recommended to me, don't ever watch the first episode and just go past that. Mm-hmm. So I've never seen the first episode. There's a recent episode that deals with AI and voice acting and acting. Really? It's called Joan is Awful, and it stars Selma Hayek. But a lower level business.
I have seen it. I've seen it.
You've seen that?
I've seen parts of it.
Yeah.
How did I see that? I think my wife was watching it. My wife was watching it, and I was going in and out from work. Yeah.
But just that based on the terms and conditions we all sign for everything without reading it, mm-hmm. that it gave what was effectively Netflix in the show the rights to recreate a show about your life using solely AI, mm-hmm. And what it recorded from your phone and your conversations and your devices throughout the day. And So the Joan one was just the prototype. They were going to roll one out for everybody's life.
Wow.
That would be, and you would be able to watch your day, and everyone would be able to watch your day as a acted out series at the end of the day.
Great story. What a great storyline.
And so, and it was like everybody else, and you would always get a level up in who was playing you. So like the actress, I forgot who was playing the Joan in the show. Her story was played by Selma Hayek.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Selma Hayek version of the world, that show also existed on Netflix, and Selma Hayek was played by Cate Blanchett. And so everybody just kind of like leveled up. But and that was just one of those things. It's like, it's just so, it's like that's completely, a plausible future.
It really is. Yeah. It's kind of Truman-esque from the Truman Show, but on a whole other level. But just what a great storyline. But yeah, I remember that now. And I remember it was Black Mirror. And I remember saying to my wife, "Oh, I thought we weren't going to watch this anymore." She said, "Well, I heard that the rest of it was nothing like episode 1. Episode 1 was so disturbing that I saw it 3 or 4 years ago and still am bothered by it." I mean, it's really...
And that's why I've never watched it, that one.
Mm-hmm.
But
it was a great commentary on the depravity of us and how far we've fallen. It was just, it was a neat, but it was just framed so disturbingly. And I don't want to.
No, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's one of those. Some of those are gold. Some of those are like, I never want to see that again.
Mm-hmm.
But that just one on the AI and voice acting thing just was, voiceover was one of the things that really stood out to me. Well, man, is there anything else? If people want to go to check out your work or to find out more about you, where should they go?
AndyFieldVoiceover.com is where I am. It's just my name. And if you Google, I've made it my business to do this. So if you Google Andy Field voice actor, typically one of the first few websites to pop up is my professional website. But then also, the IMDb profiles pop up and all that. And some of my profiles on some of those voiceover websites pop up. But yeah, Andy Field, voice actor, voiceover. If you Google any of that stuff, it's probably the easiest way to get there. Or AndyFieldVoiceover.com. And I'm on all the social medias except Snapchat, I think. TikTok is my big one. I haven't put anything on there in a while, but my goal on TikTok was to be more popular than my daughter. And because she's a musician in Nashville, and she had 39,000 followers on TikTok. And I was like, I got to beat that. And so I beat it. I'm at 42. So I'm not super far. I'm not at 7 million like Stefan Johnson, but I'm on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. So that's how you do it.
Sweet. Is there anything else you'd want to leave the people?
No. Well, if you're Five Nights at Freddy's fan watching this, I guess you need to hear me say exotic butters, and then that's it.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
And just let you know again that Faith and Fandom podcast is part of the Love Thy Nerd network. You can check that out over at lovethynerd.com/faith and fandom, and you can find all the episodes there and weeks, months before you'll see it anywhere else. So thanks again for joining us.